Russia is massively confiscating apartments from former residents in the occupied territories and handing them over to Russians, while Kremlin-linked construction companies are profiting from the reconstruction of housing destroyed by the Russian invasion, writes the Wall Street Journal. In the occupied territory, the Russian-backed authorities have declared thousands of apartments abandoned, as a result of which the Ukrainians who fled faced obstacles in returning, confirming their ownership or receiving compensation. At the same time, those who arrived from Russia enjoy a number of benefits, such as a 2% mortgage rate on new homes, the publication writes. The article notes that the strategy of replacing people who once lived in captured territories with ethnic Russians is a strategy that Moscow has implemented many times, and captured Mariupol was no exception. Mass displacement and destruction opened up the real estate market. While workers cleared the rubble, realtors bought up properties from fleeing residents on the cheap. One of the new arrivals, a Russian woman from Siberia, said she had bought an apartment in the city that only needed minor repairs and intended to spend her retirement there, fulfilling her husband's dream of living by the sea. For now, she said she would rent it to a tenant, a Muscovite who now lives and works in Mariupol. Alexander Nosachenko, a former resident of Mariupol, said that a Russian soldier had occupied his seaside dacha on the outskirts of the city. Being of draft age, Nosachenko could not return to Mariupol himself to receive compensation, and his wife, who had survived the Russian blockade of the city, refused on principle to return there. The house with a clock, once a monument to Mariupol's unique heritage, now serves as a monument to Russia's transformation of the city. In the general plan for the reconstruction of Mariupol, the house with a clock was marked for restoration. However, in 2022, the house was demolished to make way for a building with a completely different layout. However, the former residents expected to be able to get apartments in the new building. The 2022 decree gave them the right to resettlement to the site of the old building. However, after construction began, they were informed that the law had changed. Residents no longer have the right to resettlement to the site of their old houses, but have the right to resettlement anywhere in the city. Mariupol resident Elena Pudak told the Wall Street Journal that her mother was trying to return to the city to get compensation for her apartment in the clock house. She was denied entry at Russia's Sheremetyevo airport without explanation, but Pudak suspects that authorities are trying to keep out people with property claims.
The nature of the fighting in Ukraine today has changed dramatically compared to what it was in the first weeks of the full-scale Russian invasion. In particular, this change has radically affected the operations that Ukrainian special forces are conducting behind enemy lines, writes Business Insider. An American instructor with the call sign Scooter, who trains fighters from the 4th Ranger Regiment of the Ukrainian Special Operations Forces, said that in 2022, Ukrainian special forces were sent on missions such as attacking a column of Russian trucks, carrying ammunition, blowing up tanks, or attacking a command post. But now, with the front line almost motionless, such missions have become extremely rare. According to Scooter, small groups of special forces are now being trained to sneak a few kilometers into the Russian rear and create problems there. The main rule is don't get caught. Consequently, there is no longer talk of operations to clear Russian trenches and occupy their positions. You go in there to make sure the Russian soldier is hungry, make sure he has no ammunition, make sure his vehicle, when it's his turn to change position, doesn't show up. Go plant mines, go destroy equipment. Take prisoners, says the American instructor of the Ukrainian Rangers. According to Scooter, such sabotage missions were also carried out at the beginning of the full-scale war, but now they are the main ones. At the same time, sabotage in the Russian rear has become much more dangerous due to the widespread use of drones which constantly monitor the battlefield. The American instructor noted that such sabotage missions actually have their consequences at the tactical level. We're not focusing so much on maneuver warfare tactics. We're training them for attrition. You hear it all the time. World War I with drones. We're training them for static attrition warfare with lines that very rarely move in any significant way. Scooter explains, the 4th Ranger Regiment is taught to sneak past Russian patrols and even learn basic Russian phrases. They're trained to be quick, because it's dangerous to hang around the enemy's first line, where troops are most alert, for too long. The Russian armed forces send their soldiers to the front immediately after their return from Ukrainian captivity. The occupiers are not even allowed to see their families. One of the recent captives told about such a case. He recorded a video on the way back to the combat zone. According to the occupier, he and others were sent straight to the front lines, despite being seriously wounded. We are driving from Bryanka. I returned from captivity 1,000 to 1,000. They shoved me into Donetsk. They are sending me to the front. No medical examination. There is a bullet in my body. My arm is broken. I was not at home. They are not letting me go home, said the Russian serviceman. This video is yet another proof that the Russian army is experiencing a serious personnel crisis. Everyone who is physically capable of holding a weapon is being thrown into battle, regardless of their health or combat readiness. In Ukraine, military personnel who have been in Russian captivity are released from further service, receive benefits and a peaceful life. In the Russian Federation, however, freed occupiers are not only not allowed to go home, but are also denied basic medical care. Russian prisoners of war who were repatriated as part of the largest prisoner exchange of the war so far, a 1,000 for 1,000 swap with Ukraine in late May, are reportedly being sent back to their combat units. Activists from Get Lost, an organization that helps Russian men either to avoid conscription or to desert, have told Novaya Gazeta Europe earlier. Get Lost has raised concerns that the repatriated soldiers could soon be redeployed to the front line in Ukraine, in direct violation of the Geneva Conventions, which mandate that captured servicemen cannot be compelled to return to active military service upon their repatriation, especially not a conflict from which they have recently been released. According to one woman whose relative was among the exchanged soldiers, the men were initially held at a military base outside Moscow before they were put on a military truck and transported to Donetsk, in Russian-occupied eastern Ukraine. One of the men later managed to contact his family and said they had reached Makiyivka, another Russian-occupied city in the Donetsk region. The following day, another soldier called his relatives to say that they had been taken to an unknown location and that all their personal belongings had been confiscated. Shortly afterwards, the men, who were being kept under constant guard, told their families that they were being sent back to the front.